Test, test. Browser audio not working. 1 second, please. Voila. Wow, that guy thought I streamed really well. Amazing. Jeez, chat is so now I'm seeing it on the web. Chat is verified only. No settings here. This is who the debate reminds me of. Waltz is kind of spazzy and ugly and jowly. All right, Vance. '94. She chucks in her fact check only against the Trump side, and then, oh yeah, well, we got to move on now. We got so much to get to. But I could waste time doing a fact check. I don't get how they can, any American can debate that the economy was bad under Trump. When they shut down the economy, yeah. This asshole, they just dodge this question, and it's so fucking important, though. Trump said he supports for rape. He supports it. Freedom Warrior sound. You got a sound problem? Let me check.
We've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think
the input source I had wasn't playing before,
just to give
so I switched it, but that was
now of course Donald Trump has been very clear
recording to my hard drive instead of streaming. Unbelievable! How big country? That was 40 people watching this.
California has a different viewpoint on this
than
Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona, and the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions. Let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject, and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world.
For Canadian viewers, I want your flash sale. Georgia's abortion ban linked to Amber Thurman's death. Amber Thurman, 28, a nursing assistant and mother of a 6-year-old son, died after doctors delayed necessary care due to Georgia's 6-week abortion ban. Says the story, provider stalled to provide care to treat the effects of a medication abortion, also known as a medical abortion. Other stories, blah, blah, blah. Investigation. Sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me.
My question:
a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible.
Oh, there's an idea.
We've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that, too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point. That's not.
What do you guys think? Is it only the woman's decision?
What was
that is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
but
this.
How?
I've given this advice on a lot of things that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works
mind
best.
your own
That doesn't
business.
preclude us from increasing
Father doesn't get
funding
any
for
say?
children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
So what's the deal? Oh, I forgot to give a thumbs down there. Thumbs down to CNN.
Comedy on CNN
Up yours,
has
assholes.
arrived.
We look at the news of the week and ask questions.
And the
Comedy on CNN. Nice try. Nice try to get gut filled. Never gonna do it. So yeah, what do you guys say? Does a man have a say in abortion? Question mark. Seems a much more salient debate. Seems calm and a lot less bullshitting tonight, which is something. A little hard to concentrate, I guess, on this. World War III might be starting. All these poor people watching CNN. Why would you watch CNN? When was the last time CNN broke a story? When was the last time they were right about anything? People still watch them. I think it's the airports, man. They're just the default on airports. Oh, what's this?
Doctors, I can't.
Carver, Saturday at 7 on CNN.
Oh
When we
boy.
look back 100
Can't
years
wait.
from now, we're going to say this is where everything changed.
What's Max? Is that their pay to win?
We are talking about the revolution.
Music could make a difference. The world fundamentally changed.
Clinton undermined himself.
America felt betrayed.
Oh, Defender, that game was so rad.
TV.
5 good things. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
No.
This election, stay with CNN.
No.
With more reporters on the ground and the best
Why
political
wouldn't we?
team
Why
in
would
the
anyone
business.
watch CNN?
Follow the candidates. Follow the voters. Follow the facts. Follow CNN.
Saturdays this fall.
Can't believe I'm getting away with streaming at all, actually.
I got news for you.
Breaking.
I'm currently rendering Matthew Ehret's latest film. I was only like a tenth of the way through when I found out that this debate was going live, so used the glitches. I wasn't prepared to stream tonight.
I promise pizza every day. If you vote for me, I promise pizza every day, plus unlimited toppings.
But does the infrastructure even exist for that, Ethan?
Shut up.
Excellent question, Dana. Why are we not talking about the fact that my opponent has cooties? That's a lie.
Well, that was a curveball.
Follow the facts.
Next up, Ethan's proposal for unlimited recess.
Just funny.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s.
Good to see you here.
So let me ask you. Earlier this year, for the first time,
you joined the debate after I turned the sound on, so that's a good thing.
Of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor WALZ and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you.
Well, it seems like a nice guy, but he seems like a weenie.
I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort?
There's plenty of video of Kamala Harris saying we're taking your guns.
No, there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still.
I hope Vance's team is prepared for this. She's on video saying that she would do a forced buyback program.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And
very gentlemanly debate.
Said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety.
I've become friends with school shooters?
My shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns.
It's just the guns.
Things that you can do about it.
Sometimes it's the autonomous guns that walk themselves into schools.
I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret? Thank you.
Well, he is stating the far left principles. This is how they see it.
The high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage
Fewer
of more
guns,
than 4
legal or
million
not,
homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor WALZ, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because
we're building houses,
some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening. In
Oh, but Tim, sometimes it's just the immigrant.
Is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart.
Hey, WALZ, you can make all these excuses and but sometimes it's just the immigrant.
Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we had it bad in Canada. Massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in.
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask this question. Are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land?
How do they say this? I mean, all you got to do is go down there with a camera.
Really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're...
I got a freeze thing going on.
First on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And
like I said, it's a miracle that I can stream. I'm rendering a movie in the background.
At the Supreme Court, and he would have
doing about 1% every half hour while I'm streaming. So it's a miracle that I can stream it all.
Now, fast forward. What that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is... So you think the individual mandate's a good idea? I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress works. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this.
That's bonkers.
A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families,
default set me to verified only on chat, and there's no way to change it as far as I can see.
Do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala
You should just get like 40 grand per kid.
If you look at the federal programs that we have to support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote like choice,
nameless, faceless, socialist daycare.
Because look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5 per credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case.
This is the most agreeable presidential debate I've ever seen.
You're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his. That's
good. I think it's a good thing.
I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by 2 lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state Capitol grounds in St. Paul, and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that.
Bullshit.
So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look,
January 6th. January 6th.
Don't understand
January
how
6th.
we got to
January
this point.
6th.
But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance, I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is
all right. Good comeback.
A damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah.
Win for Vance.
Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look,
the debate when you have reasons to doubt the vote counting process.
To certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is Where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
My God, people, the January 6th, it just never ends. Just never, ever ends.
And then our world changed.
Boom! It had an explosive reverberation.
TV on the Edge, Sunday at 9 on CNN.
This election season, CNN has you covered, no matter the question. From more about the candidates, to rules in your state, to casting your ballot, the CNN Voter Handbook has your answers. Visit CNN.com/vote for yours.
Hey, Mom, how many should I decorate of each? Half red, half blue?
Oof, that's a really tough call.
Who are you?
That's John King from CNN.
Let's look at the data. Your county leaned red by 15 points in the last presidential election. However, looking at the latest polling, you're going to need a lot of those purple sprinkles.
Wow, this guy really knows his stuff.
This guy really knows how to cheat for the Democrats. So this is what I was preparing to stream late night tonight, but too much film editing, too much stuff going on. I was going to hit like a little nano news thing. This looked really interesting on Tim Pool. See, get this open in Tim Pool had this guy Michael Francesi. I've watched him on many YouTube channels. He's got his own podcast. He went state's witness against the mob, and for some reason he's allowed to kind of do whatever he wants now, and he talks deep shit about the mob. He says the Pelosi's are gangstas. What do you guys think about that? Daddy Pelosi is gangsta. And then yesterday we had Sean Buckley from the National Citizens Inquiry on, and that was a wild show. Now, you don't think of Sean Buckley maybe as a wild guy, but his breadth and depth of knowledge is bonkers. We were talking about the new NCI hearings that are coming in October 17 to 19, and he blew my mind with the fact that in the 2025 budget in Canada, they've buried amendments that will completely obviate Health Canada's authority over drugs. There are special lines in there to allow the Minister of Health to outlaw any drug that's made for animals, outlaw off-label prescriptions, so ivermectin and stuff like that. You'll remember from the quote-unquote pandemic. That's being hidden in the budget. It's not a law of its own, changing the Ministry of Health. Plus the ability to exempt any drug from the laws that are there to prevent fraudulent claims. So drug companies will be able to claim anything on their drugs. And all the minister has to do is wave his hand, and the drug is exempt and approved for human consumption in Canada. Thirdly, any drug that is, it doesn't even have to be approved. If another country's regulatory agency, and of course think America and Britain, approves or even has paragraphs in there, and they don't approve of it, even if they have a paragraph where they say the drug was okay for this, Canada can use that and bypass Health Canada's safety regulations and approve a drug instantly, just as they did for COVID. And this is all in Bill C-69, which is our next budget. And it's secretly hidden in there. As you can see on screen here. I love this new freeform app from Apple. I saw that they were releasing it, and I thought it was totally lame, but it's actually great for doing conspiracy pin boards. All right, back to the debate. Do we have audio? Here. Audio's not passing through now. One moment. See what happened to me earlier. Shoot. Oh, I probably muted it. Here we go. There we are. Sorry for that. He said what? He did what? He said that? Guys, they don't even make serious allegations. Nothing. He just said nothing. Ooh, we are getting glitches. Nice. He was a good pick, man. He is smooth. Shut up, bitches. All right. Yeah, it felt kind of Kennedy Nixon to me. All right, so I've had my head up a couple of movies, so I haven't really been able to keep up with much. I know we're like, why, I wanted to go to RT and find out what's going on in, let's go back. Okay, there we go. And see what the Eastern view is on what's going on with, you know, Iran's alleged attack on Israel. Are we getting audio here?
Actual heavyweight.
Desktop audio on. I don't know why I'm not getting audio. What is going on, man?
Affairs. It's very clear to anyone, and in fact, we've seen the European Union acting rather mildly. The European Union has urged for restraint and ceasefire. It hasn't immediately come in with profuse statements of, oh, Israel has a right to defend itself. And no, it understands, even whatever they say on other levels. There's an understanding that right now the problems are being caused by Israel, and that it's in Israel and the United States that can stop it. Some European...
Because I know, you know, much of the world knew that this was coming. Even Biden's Twitter made a statement about the upcoming missile strikes in Iran. Putin made an emergency meeting at the Kremlin, and the Prime Minister was in Turkey, I believe. No, he was in Iran, I think. So, you know, there was something coming, and I want to know why. I've been really out of touch. If anybody in chat knows a little bit of the skinny of what's going on, let me know. I certainly don't believe a single word about this that the mainstream media is given, which is just going to be terrorist Iran suddenly decides the smartest thing in the world to do is to fire missiles into Israel, because that'll work out great. So there was a reason behind this, and I'd like to know what it is. RT is always a great place to go if you at least want to hear the opposite side. You don't have to like it, don't have to believe it, but, you know, we certainly can't believe what CNN, CBC...
Prime ministers have, or political figures have, like Rutte in Holland, have made statements of immediate support for Israel, but they are known Islamophobes. So certainly the onus is definitely on the United States to stop it, and the candidates will be saying all kinds of. We'll see what Trump says, and tonight there is a vice presidential debate. So I expect to hear more more profuse condemnations of Iran and praise for Israel without any critical discussion of what has caused this entire thing. Indeed, not just this, but what led to the October the 7th, 2023 attacks in the first place. Those attacks were not a sudden, Palestinians woke up and they're angry with Israel. This is, the situation has never been analyzed, at least by the governments, in a wider
those guys in Toronto
context, and for reasons that we well know.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your time. That's Alessandro Bruno, who's a consultant at the Gulf State Analytics Geopolitical Risk Consulting firm. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Well, meanwhile, the Lebanese capital has been coming under fresh Israeli airstrikes. The IDF has called on the people in southern Beirut to evacuate to a safe place, labeling the territory as a target due to the presence of Hezbollah. Local media reports say 2 areas in the south of Beirut were targeted in the latest attacks. The IDF says it conducted a precision strike on Beirut, but it didn't provide any further details. RT's correspondent Yasin Ekin has sent us this report from the scene.
Behind me is a residential building that was a target of Israeli raids, and we understand that the attack happened moments after reports were essentially received or emerged suggesting Iran would immediately respond with a ballistic missile targeted at Israel. We understand that the building in and of itself was a target of the attack. Right behind it, actually connected to the residential complex, is a hospital, Al-Zahra Hospital, and not too far away is the Iran embassy. So the timing in and of itself could seem a bit coincidental, but what we do know as a fact is that this is not the first strike today. This was the first building that was hit, and within 5 minutes, another target was struck in the capital of Beirut. The airport, or at least a road leading to the airport, was targeted in that attack. We do understand that these attacks are escalating in its scope, in its operations. We understand Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati says that the country is facing one of its most difficult phases.
Lebanon is facing one of the most critical junctures in its history, with nearly 1 million people displaced due to the devastating war waged by Israel. We urgently call for more aid to reinforce our ongoing efforts to provide basic support to displaced civilians.
The Israeli government says that they have legitimate targets when they carry out these air raids. Now, without contesting that argument, one thing that does remain a concern for many is that the conflict in the south has resulted in at least 1 million people that have been internally displaced, and this internal displacement has essentially resulted in scarcity in housing within the capital. People finding safe refuge and shelter have very little to no options. Schools and institutions are providing shelter, but many people are living on the streets. And air raids like this really just affects those people that have
precision
very difficult
attack
and very little
on
to
a
no
residential
options to live and survive as the Israeli government carries out its campaign.
I mean, what are we talking here? Look at that. That's a precision attack. Look at that.
There's been a
3-4
great deal of
floors.
condemnation. Many leaders within the
look at that.
immediate Middle East have been calling out on Israel to stop its campaign. And we essentially understand that the response is getting a lot more critical, a lot more vocal. The stance or the position that these countries or states are taking is becoming a lot more adamant.
Guess
we did hear
Duran
from the foreign ministers of
this.
Turkey and the United Arab Emirates, who are essentially calling for the United
Another
Nations
very sobering
to
group
take
of people
action.
to
Israel's violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon by launching a ground attack is an illegal invasion attempt. This attack must come to an end immediately, and Israeli troops must withdraw from Lebanese territory. The UN Security Council must uphold international law and take the necessary measures against this attack that aims the occupation of Lebanon. Every crime committed by Israel is also a blow to international law and the UN Charter.
The UAE reaffirmed its unwavering position towards the unity of Lebanon, national sovereignty, and territorial integrity, emphasizing the country's steadfast support for the people of Lebanon during this challenging period. The United Arab Emirates expressed its deep concern over developments in Lebanon, as well as the repercussions of this dangerous situation and
these
impact on regional
assholes attack
stability.
Israel in October, and now Israel is bombing a
reaction to the Israeli
She's on her
assault
phone.
on
She's on Tinder.
Lebanon from a member of Egypt's Foreign Affairs Council.
So, I mean,
I think
now they're bombing
Israel
Lebanon?
committed what we call about massacre and war crime. All it did, it considers as war crime and genocide as she did in Gaza Strip. The escalations in these regions, it will lessen and decrease by the what we call about international community and the leaders of the Arab countries, because they have to stress and they force Israel to stop this crazy
RT
war.
to blank
and
out the
also
soldiers'
the United
faces.
States and Biden, they want to also not to escalate the situation and don't interfere in other countries in these regions in this war, because it can turn into what we call about comprehensive regional war. For that reason, the escalations is not good, and the decrease the escalation is very important at that time from the actors and the international community and the United Nations and all the institution and organization, international organization, and they force Israel to stop this.
Well, do stay with us here on RT International as we continue to bring you updates on those escalating tensions in the Middle East. We're going to have a
Yeah, let's go and see what the Duran have to say. I don't know if you guys are following the Duran. This is a couple of correspondents who do really incredible work getting underneath the stories. They're super skeptical of, the collective West's controlled media. See what they got to say about
Alexander,
this.
let's talk about the situation in the Middle East, and
a little bit better
let's
picture
talk
here.
about
That's as good as it gets,
the assassination of Hezbollah leader Nasrallah, as well as many other Hezbollah top commanders and officials, as well as an Iranian Republican Guard top commander who was with Nasrallah at the time when southern Lebanon was bombed and Nasrallah was killed. So what are your thoughts with everything that is happening in the Middle East, this escalation that is pushing us towards a full-out war between Iran and Israel? Some people would argue that we are already in a war between Iran and Israel, which will, of course, pull in many other countries, most notably the United States. Anyway, your thoughts?
Well, I think the first point to start with is that things are going very much along the trajectory that we discussed in various programs we have been doing, going all the way back to Netanyahu's visit to the United States and his address to Congress. If you remember, we said at the time, and I want to remind everybody, we said at the time that this came directly after the changes in the Democratic Party as to who would be leading the Democratic Party into the elections in November. We said that there is now clearly a power vacuum in Washington. Netanyahu was seizing his opportunity. He's been working towards a major conflict with Iran.
Oh, I just got my reminder from Duolingo to resume my 33-day streak on learning Russian. Ask me why I'm learning Russian.
For some time, not just Iran, Hezbollah, all of the various other militias. He clearly wants or wanted to expand the war in some ways. The war that has been going on in Gaza since last October. That war hasn't gone terribly well. So he's been looking to expand the war, and he's been taking this very strong stance. And that given that this is so, some wider conflict in the Middle East between Israel, Hezbollah, Israel, Iran, a conflict that will draw in other countries. To us, it looked all but inevitable. And we see that, in fact, Netanyahu has taken steps that lead us exactly to that point. So the first step that he took, almost directly after the trip to the United States and the meeting with Congress, was the assassination in Tehran of Ismail Haniyeh, who was the chief of
I've seen X just filled today with people taking victory laps, as if they got Osama bin Laden. And, so much of this is just gut, emotional, religious-based, tradition-based hatred for anything Muslim, for anything love, a crazy, blinding love for Israel. And I'm worried that, the truth is much different, which is why I tune into people like the Duran. And the new Atlas is another one that everyone should watch to see more of a Eastern Asian perspective on the world. My showing this and us watching this is not necessarily any kind of endorsement of what any of them has to say. It's just that, God, how many times have we been lied to, people? Look, we were lied into stumbling into Ukraine, and now World War III breaking out in the Middle East. While we're all still just taking up the same traditional banners and positions that we've taken for decades, if not centuries, blindly stumbling into war. So the other side needs to be listened to. So anyway, that's why I like watching the Duran. They bring a much more global southeastern perspective from, I don't know why it's Greeks, two guys named Alex, and they're both Greek heritage. Mercouris is British Greek, and Christoforou is, I believe, American Greek. And I don't know, maybe Greeks have special insight into geopolitics. Anyway, let's continue and see what they got to say about the Middle East here.
The political chief of Hamas. Now, we discussed, and again, I want to remind people of this, the fact that he'd had a meeting with the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and it seemed as if he hadn't discussed with the President of the United States. He didn't tell the President of the United States that the Israelis were closing in on Haniyeh and were preparing to carry out that attack. And we got lots of comments afterwards from the Americans insisting that they knew nothing about it. And we said that if this was true, then the President of the United States has been humiliated because Netanyahu took this step and went round him, basically ignored him, and that this was not a good look for the President of the United States at that time. Well, a lot of people expected, I expected, that the assassination of Haniyeh would be a provocation too far for the Iranians, and that the Iranians would react, and react massively, and that hasn't happened. So we also said that if the Iranians did not react, given that one side, which is to say Netanyahu, members of his government, and their neocon backers are seeking a wider war, that if the Iranians did not respond, an even more violent set of measures would be taken in order basically to get that war going. And this is what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. So we've had firstly the attacks on Hezbollah using the pagers and the walkie-talkies. Then we've had the missile and rocket and bombing attacks on Hezbollah positions in Lebanon. Then we had exactly the same game that Netanyahu played with the President of the United States back in August. The Americans supposedly came up with proposals for a ceasefire, a 21-day ceasefire. Netanyahu appeared, or at least gave the Americans supposedly the impression that he was prepared to agree to that ceasefire. And then he went to the United Nations. He gave another very strong speech, clearly again indicating, in my opinion, that he wants a wider war. And he then went forward, even as the discussions about a ceasefire were supposedly underway, and carried out this major strike on Hezbollah, destroying the bunker where the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was located, and killing him. So again, lots of reports, lots of commentaries appearing in the media, especially here in Britain, about how once again Netanyahu has played the Americans, and that the President of the United States has again been humiliated. But as we see, the United States unable to restrain or control Netanyahu, if that's really what they're trying to do, and we'll talk about the Americans in more detail at the moment, and Netanyahu pushing hard against Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, for its part, taking massive blows, such that call into question a lot of things about how Hezbollah is organized. It's clear that its security has been deeply penetrated. There are reports now that it is riddled at many levels with Israeli spies, which is quite possible, by the way. It's lost a significant part of its leadership group, as even Hezbollah itself admits, and Hezbollah now potentially in crisis. The next 2 weeks, where Hezbollah is concerned, are going to be absolutely critical, because it's not impossible that under these blows, I think it might disintegrate. It depends how strong its cadres are, its sort of lower middle ranking officials, how intense their discipline is. They've rushed to appoint a new chief to replace Nasrallah, who is in fact Nasrallah's son-in-law. We'll see how well that person does in holding all this together. He might fail, he might succeed, but I am not in a position to assess Hezbollah's internal cohesion and discipline. So it's possible that Hezbollah might collapse. It's possible that with further Israeli attacks, the situation for Hezbollah could deteriorate further. The Iranians, for their part, now put in a position which they simply did not want to be. They don't want a wider war in the Middle East. They made that absolutely clear. The new Iranian president, President Pezeshkian, clearly has signaled that he wanted a stabilization of the situation in the Middle East, not an escalation of it. But the Iranians facing a major crisis, if they don't push back against what the Iranians are doing, then the escalations from the Israeli side will continue. And Hezbollah, not just Hezbollah, but Iran's entire position in the Middle East could descend into crisis. Even before the assassination of Nasrallah, there were mounting complaints, not just from Hezbollah, but from various other Shia groups across the Middle East, that the Iranians were betraying them, were abandoning them, and that they were starting to rethink their alliances and whether Iran was indeed a reliable and effective organization, ally. So now the Iranians have to make decisions. Do they sit back? Do they let their alliance system across the Middle East, which they worked for 20 years to build up, do they let that collapse, exposing themselves as a weaker, much weaker country than they've wanted to convey in the past? Do they start taking action, strong action, which might precipitate a wider war, which is clearly what Netanyahu wants and some of his backers in Washington also want? What happens to Hezbollah itself? Does it hold together? Is it able to hold together in the face of these blows? Can it resist the
You guys ever heard the theory that Israel has nukes so that in case they start losing,
which we will have to wait and see. And of course,
they'll destroy the entire world?
Of what the Israelis do. Do they risk a ground operation on Hezbollah's territory in Lebanon, which might be problematic, or do they cash in their winnings? They've created major stresses between Iran and Hezbollah. They've humiliated both. There's a case, an argument which could be made, not that it's the one I think that Netanyahu is going to be making, but there is a case for saying that having dealt these massive blows, both on Iran and on Hezbollah, and having humiliated both the Iranians and Hezbollah, this might be a good point to stop and cash in the winnings and start perhaps moving back towards the position that we saw before the events of October last year, when the Israelis were reaching out to the Saudis and trying to establish diplomatic relations with them, and to go back onto that kind of diplomatic track again. We'll see.
Well, I wonder how the Saudis look at all of this, given that 2 years ago, they worked with China to reestablish diplomatic relations with Iran. And all of this was done under the impression that Iran was a strong country in the region, a powerful country in the region. And now it does look like Iran is... Hezbollah definitely is not looking as organized as many people thought they were, and I believe Israeli intelligence understood this. That's my impression. It seems like they understood that Hezbollah over the years was their structure, their organization was decaying. Iran, I don't want to say Iran isn't a powerful country in the region, but perhaps other countries now, including Saudi Arabia, which reestablished diplomatic relations with Iran under the idea that Iran is a powerful country in the region, we're a powerful country in the region, together we can enter BRICS, and maybe we can stabilize the Middle East or add some stability to the Middle East.
I don't know when the West is going to get it through their thick skulls, but Iran is impenetrable. Just like Afghanistan. There's no winning a war with Iran unless you're getting into nukes. But A, who knows if Iran does have nukes? B, you've got Russia, China, India, Pakistan around them that might fire back. And Iran is one of these nights, a night soon. Okay, so now that it's insanely relevant, one night soon we'll watch an excellent video that I watched about why Iran is undefeatable in battle, in any kind of standard sense, because of just the geography of the nation and the logistics of getting in to fight Iran. It's just like Afghanistan, the graveyard of empire. And Iran is Iran for a reason. And even if we don't like who's in charge of Iran, it doesn't change the fact. You can't just go declare war on Iran and get rid of the government in Iran. It's not, it's not some third world African nation, and it's not a wide open plain, and it's not, you can't invade it by sea. It's really insane. So, okay, that's on my list. We're going to live stream that video soon with my reactions and commentaries. So that we can learn how stupid it is to even want to invade Iran. So the sooner we start talking to these people, the sooner we'll be out of this. And this is why, if I was American, my vote would be Trump. And up here, my vote is PPC. See, Polyev today. Oh, yeah, I should find that tweet. It's hard on browser, though. He tweeted out today, exactly what we've been saying since the Reagan years. Oh, those Hezbollah terrorists and Iran terrorists, and yay Jews, and let's kill them all, and yay, let's go. None of this will change if we vote in the Conservative Party.
And now they may be looking at Iran and saying, well, these guys aren't as strong as we thought they were, and they really don't have the power to stabilize the situation in the region. Perhaps we need to look elsewhere. I mean, it seems like there's going to be a lot of doubts, not only about Hezbollah, but about Iran as well.
Indeed, there definitely will be. Now, I think the Saudis are very conflicted because from their point of view, they actually have come up against the Iranians on several occasions themselves, and they've lost. They lost against the Iranians in Syria. They lost against the Iranians, or maybe they didn't. Losing is too strong a word. But anyway, they were pushed to a draw by the Iranians and their allies, the Houthis in Yemen.
And how long ago was Syria? How long ago was Syria?
Syria was a while back, but Yemen
Yeah,
I know, but Yemen continues to be a problem. So I don't think at one level they will want to revisit all that. They've also seen that the United States cannot deliver on all the things that it says.
No, like United States can't deliver, Europe can't deliver, Canada can't deliver. We've been raping our own militaries for years now to send it all to Ukraine. What the hell are we thinking? You can get into another war? Absolutely ridiculous. We'll shift modes here and go back to RT. Let me see if I can make this change here. All right. Am I going to get audio? That's the big question. Play. Yes, we got audio.
News from across the globe. This is the News Hour on RT International. Thank you for joining us as we focus our coverage on the spillout from the events in the Middle East. Well, Israel has come under a barrage of Iranian missiles fired in a retaliatory strike. Iranian military chief of staff says Iran has targeted Mossad base two military bases and gathering places of Israeli tanks. Footage from across Israel shows dozens of rockets coming down in the middle of the night.
Wow.
Iran claims many of the missiles penetrated Israel's air defenses, with some hitting
We got
Tel
it so
Aviv.
peaceful over
Rockets
here.
from
Can you
Tehran
imagine
have
this?
never
Seeing this?
successfully reached the city before. However, Israel claims most of them were shot down. The Iranian foreign minister says the country acted.
Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Remember, like, Ukraine, like, they shoot down every single missile that Russia shoots into Ukraine. Unless they can claim that it hit a hospital or something.
Only after giving peace a chance.
Word on the street is that the air defense system they bought from America did not work. And almost all of these missiles got through.
Earlier this evening, we exercised self-defense.
And the interesting thing is, as far as before this stream, maybe they'll update this. There was, on this entire, crazy terrorist attack from Iran, only one person died, and we'll see how they died in a second.
Under Article 51 of the UN Charter, targeting solely military and security sites in charge of genocide in Gaza and Lebanon. We did so after exercising tremendous restraint for almost 2 months to give room for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Nice AI voice, RT.
Our action is concluded unless the Israeli regime decides to invite further retaliation. In that scenario, our response will be stronger and more powerful.
Okay, well, wow, well, that's something. Iran did this, but they're saying that's all they'll do unless Israel wants to FAFO.
Powerful.
Interesting.
Well, Iran has released footage of the head of the Islamic
We are on the phone.
Guard ordering the rocket strike, while Israel claims little damage was inflicted. Iranian media reports claim that an Israeli gas rig in the Mediterranean was hit.
They're all air bases.
3 military bases with stored F-35 fighter jets and tanks. The Iranian military chief of staff has also warned of additional strikes. This is unless Israel de-escalates.
If the Zionist regime, which has gone insane, is not contained by America and Europe and intends to continue such crimes or do anything against our sovereignty or territorial integrity, tonight's operation will be repeated with much higher magnitude, and we will hit all of their infrastructure.
We do know is that around 400 ballistic missiles in the first phase of this strike were fired. Ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and some of them hypersonic missiles were fired towards Israeli territories. And for the first time, Iran has used its domestically built Fatah hypersonic missile, which Iran takes great pride in. We do know that some of the missiles were fired from central parts of Iran, and the others were fired from Iran's western borders, which are closer to Israel. There's a distance of around 2,100 kilometers between Iran's eastern borders all the way to Israel. And hypersonic, some of them traverse this distance within 10 to 12 minutes. So this time around, compared to what happened in the April missile strike by the IRGC against Israel, the majority of the missiles penetrated the Iron Dome. That's based on a Reuters report. And also there are reports by some Iranian media outlets suggesting that more than 80% of the fired missiles hit their intended targets. And among those targets are 3 major military bases around Tel Aviv. And among them...
Anyone else wonder if, like, this is what it felt like to be in Europe, heading up to Sarajevo and the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, or to be in Britain and Europe, in the mid-1930s and the hotting up of World War II, sinking of the Lusitania, blah, blah, blah. Is this happening while we're wasting our time, posting about video games and worrying about grocery prices, and we're on the brink of World War III and the entire world's going to change? Anyone else feel that way? I sure do.
the Nevatim airbase, which is the largest airbase of Israel, and reports also say that this airbase hosts dozens of F-35 fighter jets, and reportedly 20 of those jets.
Yeah, it looks like they're shooting some of them down in the sky. That looked like they were shot down.
The UN, Iran's mission to the United Nations, has said that this is a legitimate response to, quote, Israel's terrorist acts in the region.
Iran's legal, rational, and legitimate response to the terrorist acts of the Zionist regime, which involve targeting Iranian nationals and interest and infringing upon the national sovereignty of the Islamic Republic of Iran, has been duly carried out. Should the Zionist regime dare to respond or commit further acts of malevolence, a subsequent and crushing response will ensue.
Iran_UN.
Regional
I'm going to have to
states
follow
and the
that.
Zionist supporters are advised to part ways with the regime.
Just to get their viewpoint.
These attacks have come reportedly,
and crushing response will ensue. Regional states and the Zionist should the Zionist regime dare to respond or commit further acts of malevolence, a subsequent and crushing response will ensue. Regional.
You know, I don't care where you stand, but you know, as a country, Iran's going in and fucking around with you. There's only Israel is going around and fucking with you. This is the only thing that will work. Got to answer in kind. It's the only thing Israel's ever going to understand. Not saying they're right, not saying Israel was wrong, but Israel's certainly posing a threat to Iran, so, you know, I mean, they leave you no choice at some point.
States and the Zionist supporters are advised to part ways with the regime.
These attacks have come reportedly based on and following orders from Iran's supreme leader. Well, of course, we see that the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, has also recently said that.
I almost suspect Israel will chill a bit on this. I think they're maybe probing, seeing what they can do, and they killed some big leaders, right? So, I don't know, we'll see.
Quote,
what do you guys think?
Netanyahu know that Iran is not a belligerent nation, but it stands firmly against any threat.
Based on legitimate rights and with the aim of peace and security for Iran and the region, a decisive response was given to the aggression of the Zionist regime. This action was in defense of the interests and citizens of Iran. Let Netanyahu know that Iran is not a belligerent, but it stands firmly against any threat. This is only a corner of our power. Do not enter into a conflict with Iran.
All right.
We are hearing also remarks and comments and warnings from other parts of the resistance axis, including the Iraqi resistance force, warning, quote, if U.S. takes action against Iran, or if Israel seeks to use Iraqi airspace for operations against Iran, they will, quote, target American bases in the region. So,
whoa. So that's Iraq. Iraq, who we spent, almost 30 years domesticating as a pet? And now Iraq is saying the U.S., Israel can't use their airspace, can't use their land, and if they do, they will target Israel. We're looking at, the situation that went back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. We're looking at potentially the outbreak of a major war in the Middle East.
Very tense moments there, and the situation could any time soon spiral out of control.
Maria, what do we know so far about Iran's attack on Israel?
Well, we were in northern Israel when the Iranian attack began, returning from filming at the border with Lebanon about 20 to 30 minutes after we left.
And I want to take a moment, interrupt this nice lady, and say, where is this reporting on CNN, Fox, MSNBC? Remember, there were conflicts, and there used to be people on the ground doing the hard work, reporting to us objectively. Where is this? Like, I've got to go to a network that's been banned and vilified by current Western governments just to get some actual reporting on the ground. Now, yes, they might have a certain bent. That's fine. I know that. But at least they're there. At least they're talking about it.
the city of Kiryat Shmona. Rocket alert app on my phone went into overdrive with non-stop notifications signaling threats across central and southern Israel. There were no bomb shelters or sirens in that area.
Wait, there's an app for Middle East threats?
Because there was an open space along the road. So we had to lie down and wait for the attack to pass. And this is how we spent around 40 to 45 minutes. And above us, we saw the Israeli defense system intercepting missiles, rockets, or drones, we don't know, lighting up the dark night sky. The latest that we hear from the IDF is that it is now preparing to retaliate. We will attack with force tonight throughout the Middle East, the official statement of the Israeli army says. As you remember, Israel has recently been fighting on multiple fronts, attacking what it called terror targets in Gaza, in Lebanon, also in Syria, and as far as in Yemen. And the message that the Israeli military and political leadership has been sending these recent weeks was that we will reach Israel's enemies no matter how far they are, even if it needs to fly around 2,000 kilometers, they will be capable of doing that. That was about Yemen. Earlier on Tuesday, Iran launched an unprecedented offensive against Israel. Reports suggest that Israel's military...
Oh, we got a Ruskiism here. Blusts in Berlin. Ja, der Blust in Beirut. Blust in Beirut.
Facilities were primary targets, including the military headquarters in Tel Aviv and a strategic military intelligence base. The gas rigs, indeed, in the Mediterranean were also targeted, but we hear officially that no damage to any of them was reported so far. Israeli army spokesperson Daniel Hagari has said that the country's air defenses shot down most of Iranian missiles and that only a few hits were recorded, including in a town of Gadara, where a school was targeted. One person was killed in the city of Jericho in the West Bank by a rocket, the Palestinian Civil Defense reported. And according to the Israeli National Medical Service, 2 people were injured in Tel Aviv. They have shrapnel wounds. Let's take a listen.
MDA EMTs and paramedics are searching sites of rocket strikes. Currently, there are no reports of injuries from the fire towards Israel, other than minor injuries from shrapnel or falls on the way to safe areas.
Earlier, the IDF spokesperson said that the protection, meaning the missile interception systems, air defense system of Israel, is not hermetic, and he urged the population to stick to the home front command and stay in protected areas. Restrictions were later lifted, but we hear that Netanyahu and several ministers were reportedly hiding in an underground fortress in Jerusalem for several hours during the Iranian attack. The whole city was also targeted, and the security cabinet has convened in that bunker in Jerusalem for the first time during this war to discuss the ways to respond to this attack. And while we hear reports right now about the...
Hey, honey, let's open a restaurant. It'll be great. We make the great shish taouk, and then that happens just one night while you're working.
Second wave of Iranian attack. Well, we can hear it on some Arab channels throughout social media. IDF spokesperson in his 4th presser on Tuesday earlier said that the IDF doesn't have an indication that more rockets will be cut.
This is Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. How the fuck have we gotten from some guerrilla forces did an attack supposedly on Israel in October? How do we get from that to them bombing Beirut?
But instead...
Oh, look, they fixed it. It's not blusts, it's blasts in Beirut. Nice.
Again, breaking news, the Israeli army says it will retaliate, and a strong response is expected tonight. Reports indicate that the U.S. Secretary of Defense informed his Israeli counterpart that Washington has heightened the readiness of its forces in the Middle East in response to the escalating tensions. The White House spokesperson also said that the U.S. military helps Israel to intercept Iranian missiles. So as we can see, the two states are working together to defend Israel in this moment. We also hear that Joe Biden gathered the Security Cabinet for further consultations to discuss further steps, how to ease tensions in the Middle East and how to act in this recent escalation.
At my direction, the United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective.
They just make it up, and they lie, and they lie, and they lie. It's like you killed 3 million Russians, you know? They just make this stuff up.
And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the brazen attack we expected.
It's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from most sources that the vaunted missile shield did not work.
No mistake. The United States is fully supportive of Israel.
We also know that the UN Security Council is expected to convene on Wednesday.
Like, is there a threat of someone mistaking that the U.S. doesn't support Israel? Is that a big thing going on out there, Joe?
To discuss the Iranian attack, and maybe by that time there will be already an Israeli attack against Iran.
Well, people across the region have been celebrating the missile strike on Israel in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. Locals brandished Hezbollah flags and portraits of the movement's slain leader, as well as the supreme leader of Iran. Crowds, meanwhile, in Gaza cheered as they watched the Iranian rockets flying towards Israel, while in Tehran, citizens were chanting anti-Israeli slogans while also displaying flags and portraits of iconic figures. The Iranian strike coincided with a mass shooting that left at least 7 dead in Tel Aviv. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed both those instances in his latest television appearance.
Citizens of Israel, at the opening of my speech, I send my condolences to the families of the victims of the attack in Jaffa and the recovery of all the injured. Even after this attack, there is a dedicated and murderous hand. It comes from Tehran. Tonight, Iran again attacked Israel with hundreds of missiles. This attack failed. It failed thanks to Israel's air defense system, which is the most advanced in the world, and I congratulate the IDF on its impressive achievement. It is also due to the generosity and responsibility you have shown to the citizens of Israel. I also thank the United States for its support in our defense effort. Iran made a grave mistake tonight, and it will pay for that. The Iranian government does not understand our intention to protect ourselves and our determination to end our enemies. Sinwar and Def did not understand this. Nasrallah and Mohsen did not understand this. And apparently in Tehran, those who do not understand this, they will understand. We will stand by the rule we have set.
Well, Tehran University professor Saeed Mohammed Marandi says Israel will be sorry if it decides to keep up the regional escalation.
They assassinated scientists. They murdered Iranian military officers. They bombed an Iranian embassy.
Whoa.
They injured an Iranian ambassador in Lebanon through his beeper. They have been killing Iranians and guests of Iran in Iran. Mr. Haniyeh, who was an official guest of the president. Iran showed patience. That time is over. It's finished. From now, it's like someone who finally jumps into the pool. From now on, it is a response for every provocation. If the Israeli regime makes the foolish mistake of responding, the Iranian retaliation will be even more severe. and Iran will continue to hammer the regime until it submits. Remember that Iran has many underground missile and drone bases across the country, huge underground bases, hundreds of thousands of missiles and hundreds of thousands of drones. These were created because Iran, after the United States invaded Afghanistan and Iraq, it was preparing for war with the United States. But now they're using it against Israel. So this is for something much bigger than Israel. Iran can easily outgun the regime. And Israel is already in more than enough trouble as it is. So the Israeli regime would be smart to end this. And I think there are many in Tehran which would actually like to see an Israeli retaliation so that the Iranians can really hammer them hard. But I think the most important thing is actually not what the Israelis do, because they'll, as I said, they'll be punished. But it's what the Americans decide to do.
Yep.
And those
okay, going to get going on this. I know that there's a clip in here that we really want to share. Oh my God! Look at that shit.
Well, local media reports say 2 areas in the south of Beirut were targeted in the latest attacks.
Fucking residential building.
The IDF says it conducted a precision strike on Beirut, but it didn't
yeah, that's
provide
a precision
any details.
strike.
RT's Yasin Ekin sent this report to us.
Like if you're walking down the street from the corner store, that explosion is just going to go around you because you're not Hezbollah.
Behind me is a residential building.
Okay, we watched this earlier.
It's facing a target, million shells. Weeping.
Of the
Trying to find the missile drop. Did you guys see the clip of the missile drop?
No, why is this possibility? Mostly it's a Palestinian.
Pepe Escobar, this guy's great. He actually knows Matthew Arrett, and they've done interviews together. This guy is actually excellent. Maybe we'll watch it another time. I want to get to that clip. The missile falling, is this it?
Well, media
a mass shooting in Tel Aviv. I didn't hear about this. Did you guys hear about this?
For it.
Well, media reports suggest that there were at least 2 gunmen, both of whom were believed to have been neutralized. At least 10 people were also wounded, including 2 critically. RT's contributor Nick Kolyochin reports from the scene.
Now in Tel Aviv, people can go outside after a panic that was here before because Israelis are not so used to these ballistic missiles and also hypersonic missiles, and it was really a scary moment.
There were hypersonic missiles?
To the shelters, and sometimes the regular shelters.
This is one of those things that like everybody talks about, but no one's seen. They were shooting hypersonic missiles?
Would be not enough for that, and that's why people prefer, if they can, to go to the underground parking or to more strong shelters. And here with me is an international spokesperson of the police of Israel, and he can elaborate a little bit more about what happened here, because it was not just a missile attack. At the same time, it also was a terror attack, and we are actually standing on the scene when it happened, where it happened, and Dean Azaldan can tell you more.
Yeah, so like you said, just moments before the rocket barrage started coming into all around Israel, actually, but really focused on Tel Aviv. We did have a terrorist attack that took place here where we know that 2 terrorists arrived with automatic weapons and knives and began attacking our civilians. We're standing right now on the tracks of a light rail, which is kind of like a metro above ground system that goes through the city of Yafo, which is notoriously mixed for Arabs, Jews, tourists that come around here. These terrorists didn't care. They began slaughtering innocent civilians. We know at this time, so far, 6 of them have been murdered. And there are 9 casualties, and this can change because it's information coming from medical sources. It could go up quickly. First responders, municipality officers came, intercepted this threat, neutralized them at the spot. Police arrived, ruled out any suspicion of additional terrorists that might be in the area. And all the while, like you said, the rockets were coming in. The police officers had to, at the same time, respond to potential direct rocket impact sites or projectile impact sites where it was intercepted up above. And we just asked the public to really stay in touch with Israel police. We're going to be here for them for whatever they need.
Yeah, so this is the sad reality of Israelis, and now they are ready for maybe additional attack by Iran or maybe by Hezbollah from Lebanon side, or even from the Houthis in Yemen. So Israelis are here in this stressful situation. Many of them are not used for many multipliers.
All right, let's see if we can get to the clip I'm looking for.
He's a professor. Mohammed,
no, I guess I go into crosstalk. That's a good show. All right. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. I think we're going to call it there. It's been an eventful evening, and for me, that's about as much as I'd want to get into the geopolitics until I know more. Because, wow, what a mess. I've had my head down. Got back from duck hunting yesterday in the late afternoon, and I've been editing film ever since, and then, you know, kind of like started getting messages today that World War III is starting, so, you know, I'm just gathering information. It's easy to gather information from, you know, Western media. That just one voice, bunch of crazy terrorists are hurting poor Israel. So I got to do another day's worth of collecting this stuff. And, yeah, there we go. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to take you out with a cover song dedicated to the assholes who keep us in these eternal wars. And we'll see you guys on the next stream.
We will continue to support Ukraine becoming a NATO member.
Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches in black masses. Evil minds at blood destruction, sorcerer of death's destruction.
We will stand up every day and every way in favor of the export that the Ukrainian government has asked for.
Today I'm announcing more military assistance.
No more war pigs have the power. Hand of God has struck the hour. Day of judgment, God is calling. On the knees, the war pigs crawling, begging mercy for their sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings.
Our role right from the outset of the Ukraine war should have been that of a peacemaker.
I want you to be the super spreaders of YouTube.